In the quiet village where the sound of the white gate echoed through the yard and the aroma of tamarind trees filled the air, life seemed to move slowly. But like any home, there were also hard days, and it was in the comforting arms of those who had always been there that everything seemed to make sense. Good evening, Dom. I want to tell you this story because it still stirs me deeply, and perhaps by sharing it, I can find some relief. My name is Pablo, I'm 28 years old, and I live in a small community in Mexico. What I'm about to tell you happened a few years ago. My grandmother was undoubtedly one of the strongest pillars in my life. My mother always held a very special place in my heart, but the bond with my grandmother was something different. I spent the first years of my childhood in her house. It was a simple home but filled with love, in a quiet village where time seemed to move slowly. The walls were painted a cream color that shone under the sun, and the white gate made a distinctive noise when opened. In the backyard, there were pots full of flowers and a tamarind tree that infused the air with its scent. It was in that setting that I learned the basics of life, how to tie my shoelaces or help my grandmother make the gelatin she sold. She was always nearby, wearing her spotless apron and with a smile that seemed to make everything possible. Before I even finished elementary school, my family and I moved to another, busier place. My father, mother, brother, and I left. But my heart never truly left my grandmother's house. No matter how much time passed, I always found my way back. Every afternoon with her was a gift. I would sit in the kitchen where the smell of meatballs filled the air and let myself be wrapped in the peace that only she could offer. She was the one who taught me to pray with short and simple prayers when I lay next to her in the hammock, even though I wasn't very religious. When problems arose at home, more often than I'd like to remember, it was to her that I ran. My grandmother, Josefina, was my safe haven. I clearly remember one particular night. After hearing my parents argue endlessly, I decided to leave the house and go to hers. When she opened the door, she didn't ask me any questions. She just hugged me tightly, as if she knew that at that moment I didn't need explanations. She prepared a plate of rice, beans, and a slice of fresh cheese for me, served a glass of lime water, and sat by my side, allowing me to pour out my emotions without needing words. When she passed away, it was as if a part of me went with her. The illness came quietly, slowly stealing the vitality from her face. At first, I tried not to notice, as if I could deceive time, but it was impossible. The sparkle in her eyes began to fade, and her smile grew rarer, more tired. I spent many afternoons by her side in the same room where she once told me so many stories. Now her voice was soft, her words coming with difficulty. She would sit in her armchair with the rosary between her fingers, praying with a faith that seemed to be her last strength. I stayed by her side, often in silence. Some days, I saw her crying. She tried to hide it, turning her face away or quickly wiping her tears with her shawl, but I always noticed. And it broke me because the woman who had always been my shelter now seemed to be the one who needed support the most. She would hold my hand and start recalling the happy moments we had shared, as if she wanted to comfort me, even in her frail state. "Do you remember, my dear?" she would ask with a subtle yet tender smile. "When you were little and I would play those songs for you to dance in the living room? You were my little dancer." I would respond only with a smile because the lump in my throat wouldn't let me speak. I vividly remembered her laughter as I spun awkwardly, and her clapping with a joy that seemed inexhaustible. Sometimes she would recall the time when I was a baby. "Oh, Pablito, how proud I was of you. I'd carry you in my arms, so happy, telling everyone, 'Look how beautiful my grandson is, a true gift from God.'" She narrated it with such passion that for a moment I could see her as she used to be, full of energy, her hair neatly styled, and her apron always clean. Even though sadness now clouded her gaze, I could still see the love that had always been there. Each memory she shared with me was like a spark of everything we had lived, a reflection of the happiness that had once been so present. I never wanted to see her like that, so weakened. I didn't want her final days to be marked by so much pain. Still, she remained my grandmother, my refuge in those difficult times. Her strength was in the memories she preserved, in the love that, even in silence, she never stopped giving. When she passed, the light went out. The house, once a home full of laughter and life, became a place of heavy silences. I spent the first days there, unable to leave. My grandfather was still with me, but he dealt with the loss in his own way. He would wake up early, drink his coffee in silence, and go to work. He was a bricklayer, and despite his advanced age, he seemed to find in the tools and physical labor a way to cope with grief. I, on the other hand, couldn't leave. I felt that by staying I remained connected to her. I could almost see her in the kitchen, humming as she made coffee. It was as if she were still lying in the hammock, with the rosary in her hands, or laughing at something on the phone with my aunt, who lived in the United States. One afternoon, as I gently swayed on the hammock, I felt a push. It was so clear that my entire body went on high alert. I stood up suddenly, my heart racing, and looked around. There was no one there. The house was empty, but the air felt different, as if someone invisible was there with me. Days later, while organizing some boxes in one of the rooms, I heard my grandmother's voice. It was unmistakable, sounding so close to me. My body froze. It wasn't fear, but a shiver ran down my spine. "Pablo," she called, with the same sweetness she always used when saying my name. I turned slowly, trembling, but the room was empty. Only the dim light coming through the window illuminated the space. Every night before going to sleep, I prayed to God to let me dream of her. I just wanted to see her one more time, even if only in the world of dreams. I wanted to feel her presence, hear her voice, her laughter, even if just for a brief moment. But no matter how hard I tried, it never happened. I tried everything. I lay in bed trying to recall every detail, the sound of her voice calling from the kitchen, the careful gestures of her hands as she prepared meatballs, the soft scent of the perfume she wore to church on Sundays. But nothing seemed to work. It was as if my own mind refused to give me that relief. Not dreaming of her felt like losing her all over again, night after night. I felt the need to keep her memory alive until something extraordinary happened on an ordinary afternoon. I decided to tidy up the living room. The house was covered in a layer of dust, as if her absence had frozen time. I went to the old dark wooden cabinet where the TV was, a piece of furniture my grandmother treated with such care. It was almost like an altar of memories. There were ceramic angels, artificial flower vases that seemed eternal, and photos of her children and grandchildren, each carefully placed as if they silently told the story of our family. I decided to organize the drawers. I found notebooks full of old notes, some forgotten bills, and 2 rosaries that made me pause for a moment. After calmly organizing everything, I grabbed the small stool my grandfather used to reach the higher parts and climbed up to clean the top of the cabinet. There were the black glass horses my grandmother loved so much. She always said they reminded her of the ones her father used to raise on the ranch when she was a little girl. As I cleaned carefully, I heard a voice that made me freeze. "Pablo, get down from there, you're going to fall." My heart raced. I immediately recognized that familiar tone, half serious, half concerned. It was her, my grandmother. I turned slowly, unable to believe what my ears had just heard. There she was, standing there looking at me with that mix of reproach and tenderness that only she could express. She wore her blue striped dress and the red apron tied tightly around her waist. Her hair was pinned back as always, the white strands shining under the afternoon light. "Get down from there, my Pablito, you'll hurt yourself," she repeated, this time with a softer, almost affectionate tone. My mind told me it couldn't be real, but my heart refused to question it. I stood still, watching her with tears welling up in my eyes. Every detail was there, so vivid. The loving eyes, the posture I knew so well. She took a few steps toward me, and her presence seemed to fill the entire space. "Grandma," I murmured, my voice catching in my throat, not knowing what else to say. I stepped down from the stool slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on her, afraid that even blinking might make her disappear. She smiled, a smile full of understanding, as if she knew everything I was feeling without me needing to say a word. The tears began to stream down my face, but I didn't try to hide them. I wanted to say so many things, how much I missed her, how her absence pained me every day, but it seemed she already knew. Her gaze was pure acceptance, that look that always said more than any words could. "Everything will be all right, my boy," she said with the same sweetness as always. "I'm here." I didn't hesitate. I took trembling steps toward her, guided by a deep need that came from the depths of my soul. My arms rose almost on their own, as if they knew what to do before I even thought about it. I hugged her, and in that moment everything disappeared. The world around us simply ceased to exist. There were no more walls, furniture, not even the sound of the wind or the beating of my heart. It was just me and her, wrapped in an embrace that seemed to transcend time and space. An intense light enveloped everything, as if isolating us from the rest of the universe, leaving only the warmth of that eternal moment between the two of us. I felt her arms wrap around me, firm and full of tenderness, as if assuring me it was real. Her head rested on my shoulder, and for an instant, all the weight of my pain and loneliness evaporated. It was her, I was sure of it, the familiar scent, the gentle touch, even the slight tremor in her hands. Everything was exactly as I remembered. The tears came uncontrollably, and I let myself collapse into her arms as emotion washed over me like a massive wave. "I miss you so much, Grandma," I murmured between sobs that mixed joy and sorrow. She didn't respond with words, but she didn't need to. Her embrace said it all, as if it were her way of assuring me that she was there, that she had always been there, even when I couldn't see her. In that instant, my mind was flooded with a torrent of memories. It was as if a door had been opened, and every moment we had shared rushed in, overwhelming me with emotions so intense I could barely stand. I saw my grandmother in the kitchen, standing by the stove, wearing her apron stained with dough as she prepared tamales late at night. "They're for your party, Pablito," she would say, tired but with a look full of happiness, as she filled the corn husks with her perfect filling. Suddenly I was back on December 12th, when she dressed me up as Juan Diego. With skillful and careful hands, she wrapped me in the poncho she had woven for me and, with a playful smile, drew a fake mustache on my face with black eyeliner. "You look so handsome, my boy. Even the Virgin will want to smile when she sees you," she would say, kissing me on the forehead. Then came the school days. I saw myself walking into her house with my diplomas. "You did it, Pablito. I knew you were the smartest, my love," she would say, hugging me tightly. Her eyes shone with pride, and her words meant more than any medal. I also revisited the dark moments when the shouts of my parents' arguments echoed through the house like sharp blades. I would run to my grandmother. "It's all right, my boy, it's nothing, I'm here with you." I remembered the lazy afternoons when we would swing on the hammock. We would talk about everything and nothing, and her voice was always calm, almost musical, like a song you never wanted to end. These memories hit me like shooting stars, shining too quickly for me to grasp them all at once. I smelled things, the fresh coffee in the mornings, the hot chocolate in December, the delicate perfume she wore to church on Sundays. I heard sounds, her laughter, the joyful shouts of children at parties, the gentle clinking of rosary beads between her fingers. There was happiness, love, and a pain so deep it nearly took my breath away. Then suddenly everything turned white. When I came back to myself, the silence was absolute. The living room was the same, the cabinet in front of me, the black glass horses still in their place. The stool now toppled on the floor seemed to be the only trace of what had happened, but she, my grandmother, was no longer there. In that moment, the emptiness engulfed me like a wave, pulling me into its depths. I understood with a pang in my heart that she had come to say goodbye. That embrace, so vivid, so full of warmth, was the way she chose to bid farewell. This realization pierced me like a blade. My legs gave out, and I collapsed to the floor, unable to stand. There, in the center of that now silent and strangely empty living room, I cried like a child. It didn't matter that I was 28 years old. Her absence was like a hole in my chest, but at the same time, something deep within me told me that she had never truly left. I knew in a deep part of my heart that she would always be present. Her love, so immense and unconditional, transcended what my eyes could see. Even from afar, even from a place I couldn't reach, she would continue to protect me, as she always had. That's who she was, the grandmother who shaped me. Despite the overwhelming pain, I felt a small spark of gratitude emerge amidst the chaos. Because although life had taken her physical presence, it had also given me the most precious gift. One last moment with her, one last embrace, one last "my Pablito." Something I will carry forever, treasured as something no one can take from me. I will always love you, Grandma Josefina. Thank you for blessing me with your strength, your care, and above all, your eternal love. Before we move on to the next story, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to get the latest stories. Your presence means a lot, and your support is essential. All right, let's keep going. Living in Mexico City with all its chaos and never-ending noise makes it hard to remember the complete silence of the Sonoran Desert where I grew up. Still, that silence visits me in dreams, bringing back memories of what we experienced there. These dreams always end the same way. An immense shadow standing motionless in the middle of the desert, yet laden with an inexplicable presence, appears. I've never dared to tell this story in detail, not for lack of trying, but because I never know where to start. Perhaps because even now, I don't know if what we witnessed was real or just a product of our imagination. What I do know is that there are places and things best left undisturbed. I spent my childhood in a hidden village in the desert, where adobe houses and dirt roads felt like natural extensions of the arid landscape. The small number of young people in the village united us. My close circle of friends consisted of Hugo, always full of ideas and an irresistible charisma; Alonso, the quiet but constant presence; and me, the cautious one, though never cautious enough to rein in Hugo's adventures. Our days were filled with desert explorations, searching for treasures that existed only in our imagination, or simply trying to escape the monotony of village life. Those who've lived in places like that know what it's like. Our parents warned us about the desert's dangers, snakes, hidden pits, and the punishing sun. But there was another warning, more mysterious and terrifying: to stay away from the so-called Land of Silence. The Land of Silence didn't appear on any map. It was marked by a dead, leaning tree, as if perpetually pushed by an eternal wind. The elders said the place was cursed, a site of strange events and unexplained disappearances. To us, it sounded like a story meant to scare us away from something fascinating. It was Hugo who suggested we go there. We had already combed through other parts of the desert for weeks, and he was convinced there was nothing else interesting left in the areas we knew. "It's just a legend," he said one day as we sipped sodas in the plaza, seeking refuge from the heat. "What's the worst that could happen? If we find anything, we'll be the first to discover it." Alonso and I were hesitant at first, but Hugo's persistence was contagious. A week later, we set off toward the dead tree, carrying backpacks loaded with water and flashlights. We arrived at sunset, as the shadows began to stretch. At first glance, the Land of Silence seemed no different from any other part of the desert. But as we paid closer attention, there was something strange in the air. It wasn't just the heat. It was a stillness that seemed to hold the place's breath. No insects, no birds, not even the faintest whisper of wind. After walking for a while, we came across a clearing surrounded by stones arranged in a perfect circle. In the center, there was something impossible: a flower growing in the middle of the barren soil. It was uniquely beautiful, with petals so intensely red they seemed to glow in the dim evening light. We had never seen anything like it. Hugo, always the first to act, moved closer to touch it. "I think we should leave it alone," I said, feeling an inexplicable chill. "It's just a flower," Hugo replied, plucking it from the ground. In that moment, everything changed. The air grew even denser, almost suffocating, and the shadows cast by the surrounding stones began to stretch, seemingly moving toward us as if they were alive. None of us spoke, but I could tell from Alonso's expression that he felt it too. That night, we returned to the village, Hugo carrying the flower in his backpack like a trophy. In the days that followed, we tried to act as if everything was normal, but it was impossible to ignore the feeling that something was off. Hugo, who had always been the most cheerful and sociable of us, began to withdraw. He spent hours locked in his room, and when he did appear, he seemed distant, as if he was seeing something we couldn't. Alonso and I tried to talk to him, but every time we mentioned the flower, he reacted with unusual irritation. "It's none of your business," he snapped one day with a firmness we'd never seen in him. Meanwhile, strange things began happening in the village. Animals disappeared without a trace, and some people claimed to see shadows moving across the fields at night. A neighbor mentioned finding one of her chickens dead, with bite marks too large for any common predator. At night, strange noises invaded my house, soft taps on the windows, footsteps in the yard. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but one night I decided to grab a flashlight and check. What I saw left me frozen. Near the gate, just a few meters away, I saw a shadow. There was no one there, just the shadow, which was impossible since there was no light to cast it. It was tall, at least 3 meters high, and completely still, as if it were watching me in a way I couldn't understand. I slammed the door shut and stayed inside until morning. A week later, Hugo disappeared. There was no warning, no clues. He simply didn't return home after heading into the desert. Alonso and I organized our own search and found his backpack discarded near the circle of stones, but there was no sign of him. However, the shadow was there. It stood in the clearing's center, motionless yet radiating an overwhelming presence that left me paralyzed. My body wouldn't respond. Alonso was the first to move. He grabbed my arm and started running. I don't know how we managed to find our way back, but when we reached the village, we knew something had changed forever. Hugo was never found. Officially, his disappearance was ruled an accident in the desert, and no one asked too many questions. Reckless youth like so many others, the elders would say with resignation. But Alonso and I knew it wasn't just an accident. We knew what we had seen that night. For a while, I tried to convince myself that my mind had conjured up that vision. Alonso and I made a silent pact, never to speak about the shadow. I don't know if it was fear or the inability to put into words what we'd seen, but the silence didn't protect us. On the contrary, it seemed to strengthen whatever inhabited the land of silence. After Hugo disappeared, rumors began circulating in the village. Some claimed to have seen him wandering the desert near the leaning tree, as if searching for something. Others swore they heard his voice at night, calling from afar almost like a lament. The most disturbing, however, were the shadows. They were no longer confined to the desert. Now they slid between houses, prowled the yards, and lingered in the fields at night. Donna Celia, a neighbor, told me about something she saw one early morning while fetching water from the well. It was tall, taller than any man I've ever seen. It didn't move, but it felt like it was watching me. When I blinked, it was gone. Her words brought back the memory of what Alonso and I had seen the night Hugo disappeared. As the weeks passed, I noticed Alonso began to act differently. At first, I thought he was simply grieving Hugo's loss, but it soon became clear there was more to it. He started missing school and spent hours wandering the desert alone, especially near the dead tree. One afternoon, as we returned from one of these walks, I decided to confront him. "Alonso, what are you looking for out there?" I asked. He stopped abruptly and stared at me with an intensity I had never seen before. "I need to know what happened to Hugo," he replied. "I can't just let it go." "Hugo is dead, Alonso. We both know that. There's nothing more we can do." He shook his head vehemently, clenching his teeth. "No, you don't understand. He's not dead, at least not in the way you think." His words unsettled me. What did Alonso know? What had he discovered in his solitary wanderings? One night I decided to follow him. I waited until I saw him leave his house with a flashlight and a backpack. He walked with determination toward the desert. I kept a safe distance, trying not to be noticed. I knew it was crazy, but I couldn't let him face whatever was out there alone. I followed his steps to the dead tree and then to the circle of stones. When I arrived, I saw Alonso standing in the clearing, staring at the ground. He was muttering something, a kind of prayer or plea, but the words were incomprehensible to me. "What are you doing, Alonso?" I asked, breaking the heavy silence. He turned quickly, visibly startled, but didn't answer. Before he could say anything, everything around us changed. The air turned cold, as if the desert's heat had been suddenly drained away, and a shiver ran down my spine. Then we saw it, the shadow. It was bigger than I remembered, a tall, dark figure rising at the edge of the circle of stones. It had no eyes, but it felt as though it was staring directly at us, aware of our every move. Alonso froze as if rooted to the ground while I felt my legs wobble beneath me. "We need to get out of here," I whispered, trying to pull him, but he remained immobile, as if hypnotized. The shadow began moving toward us slowly, but each step made its presence more suffocating. In a surge of desperation, I grabbed Alonso's arm and dragged him out of the circle of stones. I don't know where I found the strength, but we ran until our bodies couldn't take it anymore. That night when I got home, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, the shadow's image returned. Its silhouette was etched into my mind, and even in safety I felt as though it was still watching us, from afar but attentively. The next day Alonso seemed different. Something in him had changed, as though what had happened the previous night had answered the questions that consumed him. Still, he was colder, more distant. "Don't worry about me," he said when I tried to question him again. "I know what I need to do." I had no idea what he meant, but I decided not to press. Something inside me told me I didn't want to know. A few days later, Alonso disappeared. Like Hugo, he vanished without a trace. Some swore they saw him heading into the desert at dawn, but no one followed. His family was devastated, but I knew his fate was tied to that shadow. I thought about returning to the Circle of Stones, but I didn't have the courage. Something told me that if I did, I might never come back either. So, consumed by a mix of guilt and fear, I decided to leave the village. I couldn't live in a place that constantly reminded me of what I had lost. Today, many years later, living in Mexico City, the memories of those days still haunt me. Sometimes, on the quietest nights, I feel the same weight in the air that I felt in the desert. I try to convince myself that it was all just a mix of fear, imagination, and coincidences. But there's one thing I can't ignore: the shadow. I still don't know what it was or why it chose us, but one thing is certain: I've never truly felt alone again. On some nights, in the darkest corners of my room, I feel like I see it again. It's there, motionless but present, as though the desert in some way has never let me go. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to leave a like. It really makes a difference. Okay, let's continue. My name is Marisa. When I was little, we lived in a simple house with exposed brick walls and a metal roof that got so hot at noon, it felt like it might melt us. It was just me, my mum, and my younger brother. My mum was a determined woman, always working hard to make sure we lacked nothing. Even with little money, she never let us feel like we had less than others. As the older sister, I helped around the house by taking care of my little brother David while she worked. Sometimes I also helped by washing clothes or organizing the things people gave us. Accepting used clothes was common. Some women would gift them to us, and Mom always received them with gratitude. Those moments often brought unexpected joy, like getting something new without having to spend money. I loved going through the items, searching for pieces that might fit me. Mom would always say it was lucky that people thought of us. We had a small mirror in the house, its frame worn but enough for me to see myself trying on the clothes. I would stand there, trying on piece after piece while my mom watched me from the table. Every time I paraded around in something new, she would smile in a way that made her exhaustion seem lighter. "You look beautiful, Mari," she'd say, and I would twirl around pretending to be a model. Even those clothes, which came from others, ended up feeling like they had always belonged to us. Mom had a constant habit. She washed everything before we used it. She explained it wasn't out of distrust, but as a precaution. "You never know who used it before, dear," she'd say while scrubbing each piece with force, as if erasing any trace of the life those clothes had once lived. To me, it felt normal, even reassuring. When Mom finished, the clothes were clean, soft, and filled the house with the smell of soap, making everything feel cozier. That scent was like a hug, as if every trace of a previous life had been washed away, leaving only what mattered. But then things started getting strange. It all began on an ordinary night. Our room was small, with 2 beds, one for me and my brother, and another for Mom. Streetlight filtered through the cracks in the window, and the only sound was the creaking of the roof in the wind. David slept soundly beside me as I began to drift off to sleep. Suddenly, I felt the mattress sink beside me, as if someone had sat down. I opened my eyes slowly, confused. I thought it was Mom, who sometimes got up to check on us, but I didn't hear any footsteps or movement from her bed. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight too heavy to be my brother. A shiver ran through me, and fear kept me frozen. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, but a sudden chill made me realize something was wrong. Carefully, I turned my head to look, but all I saw was my brother curled up, sleeping deeply. I shut my eyes tightly, trying to ignore what I felt, and waited anxiously for dawn. Not long after, something else strange happened. It was a regular afternoon, and Mom had gone to the market, leaving me home with David. While I was cleaning the table, my brother played on the floor, engrossed. I decided to turn on our old record player, a simple device that always worked well. I chose a lively song, something to lighten the mood. But before the song was even halfway through, it changed on its own. I thought I might have accidentally pressed a button, so I let it play. But soon, the song changed again to something completely different. Intrigued, I went closer to check the buttons. Everything seemed normal. I picked another song and waited. Then, as if someone were playing tricks on me, the song switched again. It couldn't have been a malfunction. The night before, Mom had used the record player while doing laundry, singing and dancing energetically with no issues. I abruptly turned it off. My hands were trembling. I tried to focus on cleaning to push away the strange feeling, but the worst was yet to come. Something I couldn't ignore or explain. We were in the living room, David and I, alone. Mom had left for work, and even though I tried to keep busy, the house felt heavy, like something was off. The late afternoon approached, and I carried David in my arms because he had fallen asleep playing in the yard. I went to the living room to turn on the lights before it got completely dark. That's when I saw it. A shadow. It was cast beside the window, so clear it couldn't just be a trick of the light. It was tall, much taller than anyone I knew, with the silhouette of a man. But it wasn't an ordinary shadow. It seemed to absorb all the light around it, making it even darker. David began to stir in my arms, waking up. When I looked at him, he was pale. He had noticed it too. His small hands clung to my neck, trembling. Without thinking, I ran outside with my brother. I didn't go far because I couldn't leave the house unprotected, but I also didn't want to stay inside. I wandered aimlessly around the neighborhood, circling the same blocks while trying to calm David. He wouldn't let go of my neck. It felt like the waiting would never end. As the lights in the neighboring houses turned on, I couldn't stop glancing at our street, dreading the moment the figure might step out the door at any moment. When Mom finally arrived, I ran to her. I desperately wanted to tell her what had happened, but the words wouldn't come out. I stammered, trying to explain about the shadow, its size, how my brother had seen it too, and how I couldn't stay in the house. Mom listened in silence, her face showing no doubt. She believed me. Her reaction surprised me so much that for a moment my fear grew. She didn't try to reassure me or say I was imagining things. Instead, she sighed, as if she had been expecting it. Mom always had a logical explanation for everything, but that night her voice carried a weight, as if she had been keeping something important to herself for a long time. Once, while I was napping in the living room, I felt someone tugging at my toes. She began in a low voice. "I thought it was your brother playing. He loves teasing me when he sees me resting. But when I opened my eyes, I saw you outside in the yard, holding him in your arms." My heart raced, but I decided not to say anything to avoid scaring you. And another time, weeks ago, when I went to the bathroom in the yard, someone knocked on the door. It wasn't a light tap, it was a loud, heavy bang, as if a strong hand had hit the wood. I opened it, thinking it was you or David, but no one was there. Every word Mom said seemed to turn our house into an even darker place. The fear inside me grew. I had always seen my mom as a fortress, someone who couldn't be shaken by anything. But at that moment, seeing her serious expression as she told these stories, I realized something very serious was happening. That night we all slept in the same bed. It felt like being together might protect us from whatever was there, but even then, the fear didn't go away. After that night, Mom decided to act. She didn't ask anyone for help or seek advice, but she seemed to know she needed to do something to protect us. One morning, while we were cleaning the house, I saw her placing images of saints behind all the doors. She took an old religious calendar she had kept and carefully cut out the pictures, taping them firmly. Later, she went to church and brought back holy water. She walked through the entire house, sprinkling water in every corner while murmuring quiet prayers. Her expression changed, as if that ritual gave her a sense of peace and control over the unknown. At first it gave me some relief too, but it was short-lived. Within days, things got worse. One morning, while dressing David, I noticed something strange. Small purple marks scattered across his arms. At first I thought they were bruises from playing or normal childhood bumps, but as days passed, the marks didn't fade. In fact, they got darker and started appearing in other places. His legs, neck, even his back. Mom noticed too. She tried not to show her worry, but her face gave her away. She made homemade remedies thinking they might help, but nothing changed. David, who had always been a lively child, running around the house and laughing at everything, now could barely stand. His face was pale with dark circles under his eyes that made it seem like he hadn't slept in days. He ate almost nothing, and the little he managed to swallow didn't seem to give him any strength. We took my brother to the doctor. He examined the marks, asked questions about his diet, our habits at home, and prescribed some medications and vitamins. He said with these and a better diet, David would get better. But time passed and nothing changed. On the contrary, David seemed weaker with each passing day. He also started acting differently. He didn't want to be alone for even a moment. If Mom left the room, he would cry until someone stayed with him. At night, when I tried to put him to bed, he clung to my clothes with his small trembling hands as if something invisible was chasing him. At night, everything got worse. David tossed and turned in bed, restless, as if haunted by nightmares. I also noticed he avoided certain parts of the house during the day. He no longer wanted to play in the living room, especially near the window where we had seen the shadow. In the kitchen, while Mom cooked, he would nervously glance at the back door, as if he feared seeing something there. His eyes were always restless, seemingly searching for something I couldn't see. With no clear answers from the doctor and worried about her son's condition, Mom decided to try another approach. Women in the neighborhood had mentioned a healer who, they said, had helped many people. At first, Mom hesitated. She had never believed in those things, but seeing David grow weaker and me more frightened, she gathered her courage. One morning, she picked up David in her arms and asked me to come with her. We walked together along dirt roads, past simple houses and empty lots, until we reached the place we'd been told about. The healer's house was humble but surrounded by an impressive garden with hanging pots, vines climbing the walls, and countless plants. We were greeted by a serious man who said little to Mom. "She's in the back," he said, returning to what he was doing as if it were routine. Shortly after, the healer appeared, a simple-looking woman around 50 years old. She led us to the backyard, which was filled with even more plants, and a small altar covered with candles and religious images. Mom told her everything, the marks on David's skin, his weakness, and the strange events at home. The healer listened attentively, nodding occasionally as she placed dried herbs into a brazier, releasing a thick, fragrant smoke. "These things sometimes bring more than they seem," she finally said. "It wasn't out of malice, but something came with the clothes you received. We don't know who they belonged to or what they carried. For the boy to get better, you need to get rid of it all." She was emphatic. "Burn all the clothes you've received in the last 3 months. Washing isn't enough. Only fire can purify what can't be cleaned." Back home, we started gathering the donated clothes. It was hard to remember which were recent and which we had had for longer, so we ended up separating almost everything that wasn't originally ours. Dresses, pants, shirts, each piece had a story, and burning them felt like letting go of something we had received with so much gratitude. In the yard, Mom lit a fire. One by one, the clothes were thrown into the flames. The fire consumed the fabrics as the smell of smoke mixed with the prayers Mom murmured. David slept in my arms, too exhausted to notice what was happening. When it was all over, only ashes remained, and a different kind of silence filled the house. In the days that followed, something changed. The atmosphere felt lighter, as if the smoke had carried away something invisible but heavy. David also began to improve. The marks, which had seemed so severe, gradually faded. His face regained its color, and to our joy, he started eating again. I remember Mom, emotional, watching him finish a bowl of soup, something he hadn't done in weeks. Neither of us spoke about what had happened, but one thing became very clear. Accepting clothes from other people was no longer an option. It wasn't out of ingratitude. We knew how much those donations had helped us. But after everything, we simply couldn't take that risk again. "We'll find another solution," Mom said one night with a calmness that seemed to hide the weight of her worries. "What matters is that we're safe, my daughter." And so we made a decision. We no longer accepted used clothes. When we needed something, Mom always found a way, even if it meant working extra hours or cutting some expense. She didn't allow anything else into the house with a past we didn't know. Before we get to the last story, if you're still here, let me know what time you're watching in the comments. I love seeing who sticks around until the end. Let's not stop now. On to the next. My name is Sebastian, and what happened to me was strange and hard to explain. It took place at home on a small farm I inherited from my parents. That place had always been my refuge, my little piece of peace. It was there that I lived with Beatrice, my life companion. After decades together, we had learned to appreciate the tranquility that piece of land provided us. We wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Our house was simple, a clay roof that creaked under the midday heat and echoed with the sound of rain. The adobe walls kept the house cool, and the surrounding hills seemed to embrace us, keeping the noises of the outside world away. Beatrice and I shared over 40 years in that same home. When we were young, we dreamed big, traveling, buying cattle, expanding our land. But time taught us to value what we already had. Over the years, we stopped expecting big changes. We were content with what life gave us, our companionship and a simple daily routine. My mornings began early before the sun appeared. I would light the fire to make coffee while the sky was still dark. At that time, the cool dawn air still prevailed, though the heat would soon announce itself. Beatrice liked to stay in bed a little longer, wrapped in the sheets, while I got ready to head out. I knew that later she would tend to the garden, her great passion. I would grab my machete and walk the paths of the farm. One of the things I enjoyed most was clearing the trails. No one asked me to do it, and the paths could easily be overtaken by weeds. But it mattered to me. It was like taking care of something that was part of our home. I walked slowly, cutting away what was in the way, feeling the warm air and listening to the sounds of nature. At certain times of the year, the mist would descend from the hills, covering everything like a blanket. Sometimes Beatrice would join me. With her straw hat and a smile that lit up my day, she would sit on a rock under the shade of a tree and watch me work. She would tease me, saying I was getting old since my machete seemed slower than before. Everything was serene until one afternoon when, beside the road, while cutting branches and listening to the dry sound of leaves under my boots, the noise of an engine shattered the calm. I looked up and saw a truck approaching. It was one of those big ones with a double cabin and wide tires. In that region, it was rare for a vehicle to appear. Almost no one used that road, preferring other, more familiar routes. A shiver ran through me, but I continued working, pretending not to notice. The truck stopped a few meters away from me, and 3 men got out. They wore dark vests, worn boots, and radios clipped to their belts. I immediately realized they weren't from around there. They moved with urgency, like people accustomed to giving orders, and that unsettled me. One of them, clearly the leader, approached me. "Good morning, sir," he said, his voice firm and devoid of kindness. "Do you know where the Sierra Dominguez ranch is?" I did know where it was. It was further up on the other side of the hill, but something about the way he looked at me made me hesitate. They didn't seem like hunters, nor did they look lost. There was something about them that simply didn't sit right. I thought telling the truth might bring trouble. Lying seemed like the safest way out. "No, sir, I don't know. I rarely leave here. I spend all my time clearing these trails." He stared at me in silence, as if trying to decipher every corner of my mind. Then he turned to the other 2. My heart was racing, but I tried to appear calm. For a moment, I thought they would move on, but that didn't happen. "Hey, get in the truck, sir. You're coming with us for a bit," the same man ordered, motioning toward the vehicle with his hand. His tone was firm, like someone giving an order, not making a request. I looked at them, and then at the truck. Sweat was dripping down my forehead, but it wasn't from the heat. It was pure fear. I thought about refusing, saying I needed to get back home, but the look in their eyes made me give up. I had no choice. I put away my machete, wiped my hands on my pants, and climbed into the back of the truck without a word. Two of them sat beside me, squeezing me in the middle, while the third got behind the wheel. The engine's roar broke the silence of the countryside as we advanced down the dusty road. "Don't worry, old man, we're not here to hurt anyone," one of them said. I tried to muster a smile, but my face wouldn't cooperate. It wasn't exactly their words that concerned me, but the way they said them. Their movements were hurried, their eyes constantly darting toward the brush, and the radios on their belts emitted static. Even though they tried to reassure me, my intuition said otherwise. "Why don't you just tell us how to get there?" asked the driver, his tone softer, almost trying to persuade me. I knew that insisting on my lie would only make things worse. Their expressions didn't show anger, but the discomfort they caused was impossible to ignore. I took a deep breath, stared at the ground, and responded, "Fine, I know the way," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But please, I just ask that you don't hurt anyone." With trembling hands, I began explaining how to get there. I wanted to be clear, but my words came out jumbled. I couldn't stop thinking about the Dominguez family and what these men might do if they had bad intentions. As we advanced along the trail, the day faded. The sky turned from orange to gray before plunging into darkness. The headlights were the only light, illuminating the dry ground and low branches that seemed to reach out to block our path. I pressed my hands against my legs, trying to stop the shaking that wouldn't subside. All I could think about was Beatrice, worried about me, alone at the farm. Far off, I saw the lights of the Dominguez property shining faintly like fireflies in the darkness. My heart raced. I knew we were close, that my part in this story was about to end, but I also knew the worst was yet to come. "It's there," I murmured, pointing with my hand. The leader, who was driving, nodded silently and slowed down as we approached. The headlights illuminated a worn fence and a wider trail that led to the main house. I saw a few cows resting under a tree and a light hanging at the entrance, swaying slightly in the breeze. "All right, sir, you can get off here. Thanks for your help," he said, flashing a smile that was anything but friendly. My breathing was uneven, but I did my best to appear calm. I moved cautiously, opened the truck door, and stepped down. My boots sank into the soft earth with a muffled sound. "Don't worry, old man, someone will make sure you get home," said the man, but his words hung in the air, confusing me. I had no idea what he meant. The truck drove off toward the ranch, and I stood there as if my legs had lost their function. I couldn't stay there, but I also didn't know where to go. Part of me wanted to stay far away, while another couldn't completely turn away. The fear of being associated with whatever those men were planning paralyzed me, but running away seemed equally impossible. In the end, instinct took over. I slipped into the trees beside the trail, not thinking about the discomfort of branches tearing at my pants. It was as if terror had completely engulfed me. My heart pounded in my chest, sweat poured down my face, and the coolness of the night didn't ease the tension. Something inside me knew this would end badly. With hesitant steps, I began descending the hill. I held onto tree trunks to keep from slipping, not daring to look back. That's when I heard it. Dry snaps broke the silence, sounding distant but clear enough to freeze me in place. I stood motionless, wide-eyed, my entire body frozen. There was no doubt. They were gunshots. The sound came again, louder, closer. A knot formed in my throat. I tried to deceive myself, thinking it could be anything, the wind, an animal. But I knew it wasn't. I closed my eyes, trying to calm my trembling hands, but guilt crushed me. I knew what was happening at the Dominguez ranch. I knew that somehow I had contributed to it. With every step I took away, the remorse hit me harder. The men's words echoed in my mind. "We're just lost." How could I have fallen for that? How could I have been so naive? The urge to go back came suddenly. I didn't want to keep running like a coward. I was determined, but something stopped me. A sound behind me, the crack of a branch breaking. I felt fear return like a cold wave. It could be an animal, I tried to convince myself, maybe a deer, a coyote. But when I looked over my shoulder, I saw something between the trees. It was a tall, dark figure that seemed to glide over the ground instead of walking. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. But whatever it was there, hidden among the trunks. It wasn't close enough for me to see clearly, but it was close enough for me to feel its presence. I swallowed hard, trying to control the panic. My mind raced and a thought struck me. What if it was one of the men? Maybe they had come back thinking I had deceived them. Maybe they wanted to silence me. My chest tightened at the thought. The feeling of being hunted, of being defenseless, overwhelmed me. I looked again at the shadows among the trees. There was nothing there, but the weight of it lingered. "Please don't hurt me," I shouted, my voice weak, almost fading away. I didn't do anything. The sound of my own voice seemed small, incapable of protecting me. In the darkness, I raised my hands to my face, trying to hold back the tears that insisted on falling. But I couldn't. My whole body trembled and the tears flowed like a river, uncontrollable. "My God, please help me," I murmured, repeating it like a mantra, as if those words were all that was keeping me standing. Then I saw it a few meters away, a figure standing in the middle of the darkness. It was the silhouette of a man wearing a hat. His shoulders were broad and rigid, as if carrying something heavy. My entire body froze and a chill ran down my spine. Something was deeply wrong. A smell began to fill the air, strong and suffocating. It wasn't the familiar smell of burning wood, but something more intense, almost nauseating, like something rotting in the fire. When the figure took a step toward me, I felt panic take over. Before my mind could process it, my body had already decided. I turned and began walking quickly, trying to get away. But the presence of that thing was overwhelming. Its steps, initially slow, began to quicken. I didn't have the courage to look back. My only thought was to keep moving, as if something invisible was pushing me away from the spot where I had gotten off the truck. The sensation was indescribable. It felt like a threatening force, one I couldn't see, was about to catch up to me. My body reacted before my mind, and I started running. Every step was a stumble, and tears streamed uncontrollably, making it hard to see. The smell of burning grew stronger, choking my throat and mixing with the terror already consuming my mind. I didn't understand what was happening, but every time I slowed down, the steps behind me got closer, like a constant threat. Then I heard the sound that terrified me most, a growl. At first it was low but deep, loaded with something primal. My reflex was to turn my head, even though I knew I shouldn't. The darkness made it hard to see, but I was certain it came from that figure. For a moment I saw its broad, disproportionate shoulders moving in a strange way, swaying unnaturally. The only thing I could do was pray. The words escaped my lips in broken murmurs, barely audible, as my mind tried to find comfort in faith. But my prayer was brutally interrupted. I felt a sharp impact on my back, something like a branch hitting me between the shoulder blades, knocking me off balance. Another blow hit my waist and I fell. "Please don't hurt me," I begged, crying. "I'm leaving, I won't come back." Before I could react, my body tumbled. I rolled downhill, hitting rocks and feeling branches and thorns tear at my skin. My shirt ripped, and the pain from the cuts burned like fire. The loose earth and dry leaves weren't enough to cushion the fall. Everything seemed to collapse around me as I tried, unsuccessfully, to grab onto something to stop. The stones scraped my hands, and the slope was too steep for me to hold on. When I finally stopped, I was sprawled on the ground, panting, my body covered in dust and scratches. I trembled with fear and exhaustion. With effort, I turned my head, dreading what might be lurking. The trees around me seemed denser, darker, as if they were watching me. I didn't know where I was or how much time had passed. All that remained was one certainty: I couldn't stay there. But despite that, my body wouldn't respond. "My God," I whispered between sobs. "Please, help me." With strength I didn't even know I had, I managed to get up. The only certainty I had was that I needed to keep going downhill. Maybe I would find my way back to the farm. But the worst part was knowing that presence was still there. I could feel it. The shadow wouldn't leave me. It always kept the same distance, no matter how far I walked or how fast I tried to go. For the rest of the walk, it made no sound. It didn't come any closer, but it also never moved away. My eyes tried to focus on it, trying to understand it, but every time I did, its form seemed to disappear among the trees, as if dissolving into the landscape. I kept walking until the first rays of sunlight began to illuminate the brush around me. My body was exhausted, but something inside me kept pushing forward. The need to get home, to find safety, was all that drove me. Around midday, I finally saw my farm. The simple house, with its worn clay roof and the fences around the corral, appeared on the horizon. My legs wavered at the sight, almost giving out, but I managed to take the final steps to the yard. My hands trembled as I pushed open the front door. Inside, I found Beatrice. She looked distressed, her face marked by worry, not knowing where I had been. Without asking immediate questions, my wife began tending to the cuts and scratches on my body. Meanwhile, she told me what had happened. They said something terrible occurred at the Dominguez ranch. During the night, men arrived there. By morning, when the neighbors went to the site, they found everything destroyed. There was no one left. The place was deserted. At that moment, guilt crushed me like a stone. I knew exactly who was responsible. My chest tightened. Fear took hold of me again, but I couldn't say anything. I remained silent. Beatrice looked into my eyes, expecting some explanation, some reaction, but all I did was lower my head and nod slightly, pretending to be surprised. Later, while she worked in the garden, I sat alone at the farm and cried. The tears flowed uncontrollably, and my body shook with every memory of the previous night. I couldn't shake the image of the shadow that followed me, the unbearable smell of burning, the strange sounds I heard, and above all, what happened to the Dominguez family. There was no doubt that figure that accompanied me wasn't human. It was something beyond, something that had stayed with me from the moment I got out of the truck. It was as if it had stopped me from going back, as if it had forced me to abandon that family to their fate. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Click the notification bell to stay updated on all future narrations. I post new videos here every day. I hope to see you in the next one. On the screen now, I'm leaving 2 other great videos I know you'll enjoy. See you there.